So we left off talking about how magic works in the story of Legacy. Now, I know it's not a groundbreaking thing to base it off of more of a chemical process than some kind of weird magic, even though it does. The whole point is that I wanted it to be grounded in something very standard, something that I can really quantify. So the reason why I wanted to go into this is because it'll explain the nature of things, and of course, with every single time that there's rules, there's always exceptions in Legacy. But after talking about the magic system, I thought it would only be appropriate to kind of talk about the world that the story takes place in. So, if we imagine the world that the story takes place in, it's really more of a continent. And again, okay, that was odd. And again, this is not the best depiction of the world. I don't have, my good old handy dandy map in front of me. But I'm just trying to draw the important geological or geographical features of the world. So, as of right here, you kind of see it looks like a continent that's split in half. You got you got this main river system that forks out, obviously, and this main river system is actually important because it really is what separates the world. And I think the best way to do so is actually kind of go this way. So pretty much this kind of divides the world into different halves. You got the west. Oops, my bad. I don't know my directions. You got the west, and then you got the east. So pretty much the way this world works is the Western and Eastern kingdoms work a lot like how world history is that the Western kingdoms are what's considered a little bit newer, and the Eastern kingdoms are what's considered older, and of course more strong. And so part of the East, there are a few nations of note. Right here is Dracovern. And actually, what I'm going to do in this video, because I could spend the whole video focusing on all the nations in general, but really I want to focus on the nations that Legacy focuses on in the first story. And again, there's basically 5 books in the story, so it really focuses on 2, Dracovern and Primordia. So remember, I already talked about how Mercer is the king of Primordia. Well, the leader of Dracovern, his name is Berlioz. And every single nation has a different way that it works. Also, another nation that is mentioned more as like a sub-nation or just a side thing is Tasvir. And Tasvir is led by the Dias family, which will be more important. This is all very important information, and that's why I'm going to write it all down here and probably expand it, actually I could do that right now, is I can enlarge it so I can give more detail to things. So let's talk about some of the nations here. So first there's Primordia, and there's Dracovern. Dracovern pretty much conquered and is holding all of this. Up to the north of Dracovern is, I'm trying to remember the name, Arkona. There we go. The nation of Arkona. They're not important as of right now. So what we do need to know is Primordia is a lot like the state of Nevada. It is surrounded by mountain ranges, and it's a natural stronghold. It has very few entrances that aren't, treacherous. And so Primordia was pretty much this natural, desired place that everyone kind of wanted. But the story begins with Mercer, the dad, already had his whole story finished. So, as part of the backstory, Mercer pretty much was able to lead a large conglomeration of nations against pretty much a terrorist group called the Sons of Perdition, and defeated them. And their stronghold was in Primordia. And so Mercer took it over, freed the people that were slaves there, and became their king. And that is all you really have to know about how Primordia was established. So, with that, Primordia is again a monarchy. And as a monarchy, you know, he has what you would imagine, you know, advisors, he has generals. And then what's interesting about Mercer is because it's just recently established, there's no such thing as nobles. So there's no such thing as just the rich guys like up in their, you know, foyers and stuff like that. Because what really happened is Mercer, obviously he's one of those warrior kings, right? He doesn't see the importance of nobles. He doesn't see preferential treatment. And also with I'm just going to write it down here. So Mercer didn't do it all on his own. He had his own brother as well, Nolus. So he's Exion's uncle, and he's important to the plot as well. But just because Nolus is Mercer's brother doesn't mean Nolus is special in any way, kind of thing. So again, he fits more of an advisor role because he's still important. And then you got generals and so on. So I'm going to talk about the leadership of Primordia. So you got the king, you know, good old Mercer. And then you have the other forms of leadership. You pretty much have the political advisor. And then, of course, you have the military leader. It's not some advanced, you know, multi-tiered government that we see in today's age, but pretty much you got the king who's in charge of everything, and then you have the political advisor and the military leader that help him on these subjects. So the political advisor, his name is Sophis, and of course the military leader, his name is Garth. Also a political advisor you would consider Nolus to be. He pretty much is Mercer's second, and he pretty much takes over whenever Mercer has to go do stuff. And so both of these, all three of these men are very important. Nolus and Garth both helped Mercer in his conquest of Primordia, while Sophis showed up afterwards. Now, Sophis, his background is he comes from the land of Celesta. It is a religious country that is run by a theocracy, and he was actually one of their highest leaders. He left the church and pretty much went on his own and joined Mercer. So Sophis, his rank is that he was called one of the 7 stars. So he holds quite a lot of influence in terms of religious backing. Of course, he's not part of the religion anymore, but he is still very powerful in terms of magic. So these are the 3 important people in the leadership of Primordia. Whereas over here in Dracovern, this is completely different. Dracovern is a slave state. So imagine like the South in the United States, where its economy was completely dominated by cotton. Whereas instead of the economy is dominated by cotton, you have a nation where, because of an indigenous flying reptile, pretty much a dragon, but not fire-breathing, their nests is that they would make hollow mountains, as they would create tunnel systems in these mountains. But what it really did is it made these mountains perfect prisons. So imagine a mountain where there's really only a few entrances to these caves, and they could be closely guarded, but inside is like an entire ecosystem. So what you have is Dracovern is really just, it looks like nothing from the outside, but what it is it's just a whole bunch of prison mountains run by prison slave owners that are all connected through trade routes. And Berlioz, of course, is the largest slave owner. And that's pretty much how the economy or the government works. It's all economy. So the slave owners are also the leaders. And of course, Berlioz is the biggest. So he's pretty much the head of the slave owners. But also, he owns almost all of them. And it's mainly because of his family backing. So he's head of the slave owners, therefore he pretty much owns all the slaves in Dracovern. So now, you have to say, like, well, how does that economy really work? Well, of course, there are normal people, but almost everyone is involved in slavery somehow. Kind of like in the South. Of course, in the South, there are still people who need to make food. So there still are farmers and so on. But really, a lot of people are prison guards and, you know, people who, and enslavers, pretty much. A lot of people are employed by these slave mountains, really. And so it is everything about their culture. You know, you have just the typical, you know, slavery situation where you have races that are just, you know, beaten down and stuff. And Berlioz becomes very important because he is involved in a political event that I'll go over in a minute. But so far, this is an introduction to two of the governments in Primordia. Now, this was really fast because I want to make these more bite-sized. In the next video, I will go over Arcona, Celesta, and the Tasphere nations. There are more, and I will go into them in greater depth in later videos. And of course, the nations are going to be more greatly defined as I go over the plot as well, so that I don't spoil anything. And that'll be it.